Hello, Vishrant. Can you please speak a bit about today's topic, common misconceptions about enlightenment?
Well, firstly, someone who is awake 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. They don't have to self-inquire or sit to find beingness because they're living as that. So it's always here. There's never a delay. There's never a need to find it through self-inquiry, meditation. Enlightenment itself doesn't happen to the ego. The ego doesn't wake up. And hence this whole idea of remembering who you are is ridiculous, because memory is dream. And who you are is not dream, it is reality. It is what dream appears in. You can't remember who you are. Either awareness is aware of itself or it is not aware of itself. If it is not aware of itself, it'll probably be aware of the mind and the thoughts that occur in the mind. They could be memories. And through the eyes and the ears and the nose and through touch, through the senses, the world. For someone where awakening has occurred, they can also have awareness through the mind, and they can have awareness on the world through the senses. But if they're awake, if they're enlightened, they'll also have awareness on awareness all the time. And this can be detected in a human being by those who are sensitive enough as a Buddha field, a field of energy that is created when awareness becomes aware of itself. Someone who is awake has a Buddha field 24 hours a day. If they don't, they're not awake, because that Buddha field is always there with someone who's awake. And so when we talk about misconceptions about enlightenment, firstly, the I doesn't wake up. Not possible. It's a dream in the first place. Secondly, you can't remember who you are and think that somehow that is enlightenment. That's just a memory of a glimpse, if you ever had a glimpse of who you are. Thirdly, enlightenment is 24 hours a day. It's not a partial thing. Fourthly, if someone is enlightened, they have a Buddha field around them 24 hours a day. If they don't, they're not enlightened. People think, oh, I'll become enlightened. I'll do the work and I'll become enlightened. No, you don't become enlightened. The one that does the work, the one that wants enlightenment, ends up not being here. There's an absence of the I. What's here is pure awareness and an absence of the I. So those that tune in won't find anybody here, just an absence. Enlightenment is very misunderstood. What facilitates enlightenment is higher consciousness. Someone who's done enough work on their mind so their mind doesn't constantly contract and resist the world. It stays at peace. It stays equanimous. This type of mind will support full enlightenment. A mind that is still contracting against the world, still resisting against the world, will support a half-baked form of enlightenment. That's where sometimes a person's awareness is on itself and sometimes it is not. Sometimes it's just on the mind. This is what I call flip-flopping. And for people who do eventually become enlightened, quite often this is a precursor to that, where they find themselves as pure beingness, and then they go back to ego-based reality. And then they find themselves as pure beingness, and they go back to ego-based reality. This is flip-flopping. This is not enlightenment. This is when practice is still required, self-inquiry is still required. This is where the mind still needs to learn surrender somewhere. A surrendered mind supports enlightenment. A resistant mind supports suffering. It's pretty simple. Look and see for yourself. There are so many misunderstandings out there about what enlightenment is. People get insights, they get glimpses, and they think they're enlightened. No. A glimpse is an invitation. It's an invitation to do the work, to develop a mind that will support enlightenment. It is not enlightenment. Are there any questions? Any statements? Or any challenges to this teaching here today?
The first question has been written by Brian. I know satoris are temporary and just an invitation to do the work, but are there any lasting effects or changes that stay with you after satori?
There can be. I believe that the first major satoris that I had in the 80s, late 80s, did stay. The problem I had was I didn't recognize that they'd stayed to some degree because I was still looking for that huge satori that I'd had of being everything in the universe, every particle in the universe, and every particle being love. And I was missing that there was an emptiness here, that there was a silence here. I was missing that something had happened as a result of that satori. It wasn't until later, looking back, many years later, that I realized, yes, something had carried from that very first satori. And so I think that that can happen, though I don't know if it happens to everybody every time. It was really another 11 years later that I started to realize that I was still carrying something from the original satori. When I started having more satoris in the presence of Advaita Vedanta teachers. And so, yes, I think something can carry. One thing that does carry, that's very clear, is I'm not the mind and I'm not the body. That's not a possibility. I'm not an I. I'm not a somebody that's been somewhere, that's going somewhere. I'm pure beingness. But that was held in memory, in understanding. It wasn't being directly known in the moment because awareness was not on itself for about 11 years, not continuously.
The next question is as follows. Do enlightened people have powers that other humans don't?
Like leaping tall buildings with a single bound, being more powerful than a locomotive. I don't think so. But, you know, maybe. There's a thing called siddhis, which could be considered powers. Siddhi, the ability to use mudras, the ability to see things that you can't see that are happening somewhere else. You could see them as powers, the ability to manipulate and control energy. But I think everybody can have those sort of siddhis before enlightenment anyway. It is true that some things come after enlightenment, but I'm pretty sure they could be there before enlightenment also. It's just that most people have so much awareness on what they think, they miss the subtleties of everything else. They miss the energy world because they've basically got their awareness on dream, on their thoughts. If you can be present to reality, it helps a great deal. Being constantly present to what you think is just you being lost in the matrix of your own mind, probably thinking that you're aware, thinking that you're somewhere you're not. But as long as you're thinking, you're dreaming. And that's lower consciousness. So people who wake up, they can develop siddhis, or they can already have them. As far as superpowers are concerned, I don't think so. Someone who wakes up is exactly the same as you. They're no different. They're just ordinary. It's just in them, awareness is aware of itself. Not just aware of the mind and through the senses of the world, but it's aware of itself. That's the only difference. We are all the same. We are all one.
Next, Neil has a question.
Hello, Neil.
Hello, Vishrant. So I was listening to an old Hindi talk of Osho in which he was talking about the day when he got enlightenment. And he said that when he looked at himself in the mirror, he noticed that his chest hairs turned gray. So he said that a kind of an aging process speeded up after that awakening. So is it true? Was it that your experience as well?
Awakening occurred when I was 45. I was already going grey. And I did go pretty white pretty quick after that, but I don't put it down to enlightenment. I put it down to aging. You know, as people get older, they go grey. They go white, actually. Look, the thing about enlightenment, and this is the scary thing that people are concerned about, is you can die. You might not, the body might not survive it. And so the body is affected by enlightenment.
So it is, in a way, against survival.
It's totally against survival because the mind needs to be surrendered to support it. A surrendered mind is not trying to survive. It's in a state of let go.
Right. And is it true that the more I want to be enlightened, the farther it will go away from me?
No, if you're interested in enlightenment, you need to have a pretty strong thirst for it. Otherwise, you won't put it first. You won't put truth first. The people who wake up put truth first. They don't put anything before truth. That's why they wake up. And if you don't have that desire, if you don't have that thirst for truth, it's highly unlikely you'll surrender to truth. It's highly unlikely you'll give your life to it.
Right. And what about the materialistic needs? Am I supposed to fulfill all those first?
No, they'll either stay or they'll go. When enlightenment occurred, basically, I just didn't want to speak to anyone anymore. And I was a practicing naturopath and psychotherapist, supporting 2 families. Clients would come and they'd talk and I'd sit there and stare at them. And then they'd go away and they wouldn't come back because I wouldn't talk to them. So I lost my client base over a month and went broke. Well, not completely broke, but pretty broke. And then people started coming for Satsang and started supporting what was here and come sitting in the presence. But I just sat still for 6 months. I used to sit in a chair all day long and just stare at space because I was so blissed out. And then after 6 months, one of my teachers came along and said, "Hey, you've got to come out. You've got to be out in the marketplace." And so I came out. But I had no idea about any future whatsoever. I had no idea about any past. I didn't feel connected to my past. My wife spotted that after a week. Said, "I've lost my husband." I said, "Yeah, there's nobody here anymore." And that's actually true. Though I didn't go anywhere, I stayed. But the sense of there being a somebody here hasn't been here for 22 years now. It dropped, it surrendered. Now there's just space.
Right. If that was my question. Thank you, Vishrant.
Nice to talk to you, Neil.
Next, Abai has a question.
Hello, Abai.
Hi, Vishrant. Vishrant, does the Buddha field of different awake beings will be having different kind of strength, or they'll all be equally strong? Similar thing.
No, the field of energy can change in strength depending, it seems, on how far out a person's awareness is or how far in it is. And so in formal satsang, awareness is very in on itself. Whereas if I'm in the marketplace, at the supermarket or wherever, at a restaurant, awareness tends to be out more, so the field of energy is less. It seems to be related to how far in or out at any given stage I am, as far as strength is concerned.
Okay. But as a seeker, I can tune in and I can feel the Buddha field in all types. Like even if you are in the marketplace and I'm with you, I feel the same strength. And if you are in the formal talk, even there I am, even formal satsang, there also I can tune in and feel the same Buddha field. Is it so?
It was so for me when I tuned into my teachers. The awake ones that I was with, when I tuned into them, I could feel their energy, their field of energy. It expanded my mind. It was very beautiful. The Buddha field is very beautiful. People love it, but they don't realize that it's a bit like the ecstasy before the laundry, because the Buddha field expands the mind, undoes the mind, undoes the coping mechanisms that hold everything down. And so people come in and they enjoy the beauty. And then they have the dark night of the soul occur as everything they've repressed starts to want to surface. There has to be a willingness for that to occur.
And sometimes this dark night of the soul comes in wrong timings, maybe. Like I am taking a walk outside and I start crying. I'm cooking and some anger kind of energy starts coming out. So sometimes it becomes a little difficult to handle it.
You just be warmly okay with whatever appears. That's all that's required from your part, a warm okayness to whatever's appearing. And this allows the healing, allows whatever's inside to leave, allows the vehicle to empty out all the repressed emotions that have ever been put in there.
So when I'm cooking, they say whatever kind of emotions we are having during that time, it gets passed into the food. So if such a negative kind of thing comes out, like anger or hatredness, something like that, then will it be okay for me to feel it and yet continue my cooking?
My understanding is it is true that we pass energy into whatever we touch, whether it's a human being or a couch or food that we're cooking or even water. Whatever energy that we're emitting will be emitted into everything around us. And this can't be helped. And so the best way to cook is with love, because then you're putting love energy into the food. When someone who's awake hands food or a drink to someone, it's called prasad because it's carrying the energy field of the awakening, the Buddha field. It's a gift, in fact. The thing that we present with the world always, our presence to other people is our presence. We give whatever we're carrying. And so if we're carrying anger, we give anger to people. If we're carrying joy, we give joy to people. If we're carrying love, we give love to people. If we're carrying fear, we give fear to people. If we're carrying depression, we give depression to people. If we're carrying the Buddha field, we give the Buddha field to people. That is our gift. We're always giving of our energy to whoever we meet.
Thank you very much, Vishrant. It was really very helpful for me. Thank you.
Thank you, darling.
The next question has been written by Brian. When I listen to you, I feel pulsations, sometimes in my heart chakra, sometimes my third eye, and sometimes my crown. What does this mean?
It could mean that those chakras are opening. You see, most human beings' chakras are closed. Their third eye, their crown, their heart chakra is closed. People quite often have their power chakra open, their sexual chakra, their survival chakra open, their throat chakra open. But it's rather rare to meet people who have a heart chakra open or a crown chakra open or a third eye open. My crown and my third eye and my heart were initiated by Bhagwan Sri Rajneesh while I was sitting in his satsangs in the early 80s. I started to feel a certain pressure around my crown and in my third eye and around my heart. And I didn't know what it was at the time, but it became clear that something was happening. Something was opening. And I believe that initiation of those opening changed my life immeasurably. And so I see Osho as my spiritual father and my master because he germinated what is here.
The next question is from Susha.
Hi, Vishrant.
Hello, Susha.
Vishrant, when we tune into the Buddha field, are we learning surrender?
Well, anytime you give up the mind for any reason whatsoever, you're learning surrender. I mean, if you look at the practice of watching the breath, the meditation of watching the breath at the lip, you're watching the breath, you're watching it come in, you're watching it turn, you're watching it go out, you're watching it turn again to come in. The mind comes in with a thought and you bring awareness back to the breath again. You're abandoning the thought. You're teaching the mind to surrender the thought for what is real, the breath. And so the practice of meditation and watching the breath is in a lot of ways a practice of surrender.
I wondered if coming in your Buddha field, I was just getting high and enjoying, loving the peace and silence. And was I just doing that, using it for that purpose, or actually learning some surrender? That's why I asked.
Yeah, one of the things that can occur around someone who's awake, people get addicted to the energy field because they can get high on it. They can find bliss in it. They can find beauty in it. And like anything that you can find that much comfort in, it can become quite addictive.
Yes.
But the Buddha field also supplies clarity. So you can see your mind more clearly. You can see what it's up to. You can become more aware of it. You can raise your consciousness levels, in other words. And so when I was around my teachers, I enjoyed the clarity that the Buddha field allowed. I also found that my stuff started coming up, my repressed emotions, any trauma I had, and it started to leave. And because I was willing to let it leave, because I was willing to feel it, it started to heal. And so the Buddha field can definitely be used as a drug to get high.
Mm.
But that's not the best use of it. The best use is to use it to raise your consciousness levels and wake up yourself.
Yes. Yes. Yeah, it's easier to find the silent. I lost it.
Mm.
Thank you.
Thank you, Susha.
The next question was written by Neil. As a seeker, should I be skeptical and look for evidence before accepting anything as the truth?
Heck yeah. Yep. One of the greatest things against raising your consciousness levels is believing. The seeker doubts. The seeker checks out. The seeker searches for answers. The seeker lifts rocks to see what's under them. The seeker doesn't take what's been said for granted. The seeker doesn't believe. The seeker finds out for themselves. Beliefs are just prisons. Find out for yourself. Always check out. Approach everything with doubt. Prove it to yourself, and then it's real. If it's not your own direct knowing or direct experience, put it in the maybe column. Always doubt everybody, especially spiritual teachers. Check it out for yourself. See where they're pointing. Find out for yourself. That's always best.
I have a follow-up question to that. You've had, or you've always had a devotion for your teachers. How does the role of doubting as a seeker link up with this devotion for a teacher?
I've never really had a problem with seeing the faults in people and still loving them. Just because something might not be right or might not be true or is in the maybe column about somebody, it doesn't mean I can't love them. If your judgments get in the way of love, the judgments need to drop. It doesn't mean you don't doubt still. You just don't put so much energy behind it. Anything that is in the way of love is in the way. Any belief, any defense system, anything that's in the way of love is in the way. And so the undoing of the mind really, in a lot of ways, is undoing of all defense systems, reverse engineering anything that's in the way, so love can be perceived. And this takes a certain amount of time and effort because we were not programmed to serve love. We were programmed to be efficient little problem solvers, which have nothing to do with love. You want to find love, practice openness, and anything that's in the way of that openness needs to be removed. Doubt is brilliant. It allows you to see what's in the way.
The next question has been written by Brian. I have not experienced the karmic energy or reincarnation or samsara that you talk about. So should I remain skeptical until this is my direct experience?
Yes, absolutely. I would never ever ask anyone to believe me. That would be me saying, why don't you step into this prison and stay there? Always check it out for yourself. If it's not your own direct knowing or experience, you can put it in the not known column, the maybe column. Don't believe anything or anyone ever. That's where people get trapped. That's where flow stops. Stay in flow. Remain the doubter. Check everything out. Maybe's okay.
How do you doubt without heavy judgments?
Okay, so a heavy judgment has a lot of resistance behind it. You're the one putting the resistance behind it. Now, how much resistance you put behind it is up to you. The doubt is one thing, it's a thought pattern. The resistance behind it is another thing. You supply that, and you're responsible for that resistance. You don't have to supply so much. You can back off. Have the doubt, back off the resistance.
Next, I'd like to ask you a question that you asked to Osho. You've said that you are ordinary. Most Australians would identify as being ordinary too. What is the difference between your ordinariness and their ordinariness?
Only one difference. I'm not trying to be someone. You see, the ego takes effort to construct and hold in place because it's false. I have no interest in holding anything in place, particularly something that's false. I am ordinary. I'm not trying to be someone. I haven't been somewhere. I'm not going somewhere. I'm just here.
The next question is as follows. The enlightened masters that I have had the chance to meet, including you, all seem so powerful and untouchable to me. Yet, you've said that you are so vulnerable. How does this work together?
What's vulnerable is the body. What I am, what you are, what we are, can't be touched by anything. It is impeccable. It is untouchable. It is infinite. But the body is vulnerable. It has no defenses anymore. They all got surrendered in higher consciousness for enlightenment. So I'm totally vulnerable, totally open, no defenses from the perspective of the body. From the perspective of what I live as, nothing can touch me, not possible. So that could be seen as strength. It's not really. It's just what is. Who we are, what we are, pure beingness, can't be touched by anything.
What is it like to live from the perspective of our true nature?
There's no thought about it. It just is. It's just this vast nothingness as self. The mind is resting in that, in profound contentment. So you could say shanti, shanti, shanti. Trying to describe what beingness is impossible because it has no reference points. You could call it the darkness that is everything, Shiva. The difference between living as ego-based and living as being-based is quantum. There's no connection whatsoever. In ego-based reality, it's all about reference points for the I. Reference points from the past projected to the future. A few belief systems make up an imaginary I. In beingness, there is just nobody here. And there's no reference points. So there's no way that the mind can really understand it because it can't be described.
The following question has been written by Brian. Is a state of no mind required to best experience the constant energy field that you refer to?
Not necessarily. I was able to detect the energy field of my teachers, whether I was thinking or not. Depends on how tuned you are or how open you are to that field of energy, really. I was very open to it. I loved it. I removed anything that was in the way of feeling it. It is so lovely.
Can you talk about some of the things that were in the way of feeling it?
Not really. A noisy mind, you see, even with a noisy mind, I could feel my teachers. Even when my mind was disturbed, I could feel them. But something inside of me had locked onto that frequency. It's like a radio frequency. You can tune into it. And something inside of me had tuned into it and locked onto it. So it didn't matter what my mind was doing or not doing. I could feel it. It just started expanding everything inside of me.
Next question is as follows. Do you know everything?
I know nothing. The idea of knowing everything, how crazy. That's just someone wanting to control everything. I really know nothing. It's so nice to know nothing. It's so nice because it allows you to stay in wonderment. The collection of knowledge is probably the greatest distraction a spiritual seeker can have because it doesn't wake you up. It doesn't make you more conscious and it doesn't heal wounds of the heart. It just makes you knowledgeable about those subjects. No, I know nothing. It's brilliant.
Do you still have desires if you're enlightened?
A desire in the mind can arise, but most of the time my mind is dead silent. It decided to lay down about 22 years ago and then decided not to get up again. It's very relaxed. If it needs to move quick, it can. If it needs to think, it can. But it doesn't have much interest in that. It just is witnessing itself, and itself is silent. Awareness is aware of itself. There's nothing here. From my perspective, no matter who I'm talking to myself, because we are all one. Just some of us are dreaming and some are not. When you stop the dreaming and turn awareness onto itself, you know exactly what I'm talking about. We are one.
The next question has been written by Brian. I really enjoy Osho's talks on Zen and Taoism. When you were a seeker, were these teachings helpful?
They were my favorite teachings, Zen and Taoism. Sometimes I think that I teach more Taoism than I do Buddhism. I love it. I love the way. The beauty of Taoism is to get an understanding of what yin is all about. Everybody's mastered yang, but not many people have mastered yin because most people don't understand it. It's sometimes called the feminine aspect, yin, but most men and women I meet are yang. To be yin, there can't be any of you there. There has to be an absence. And then there is yin. Then there is just receptivity. This is very beautiful. This is the right place for enlightenment to occur. On the other hand, I love Zen because Zen involved discipline. Putting your awareness on a single point and staying there. Developing a mind that is very strong. And from that strength, it can surrender totally, unconditionally. So I liked Zen and Taoism, Zen Buddhism and Taoism. What facilitates Taoism? Finding the yin aspect as self is the practice of openness, because openness is the only practice that the ego can't use for itself. It can't hide in it. And in true openness, we find that receptivity, we find yin. It's so beautiful. When you meet someone who's living as yin, you fall into them because there's nothing there. You just fall into them. The first person I saw like that in my life was Bhagwan Sri Rajneesh. There was no one there. You could just fall into him. Very beautiful.
The next question is as follows. Do enlightened people have a certain personality type?
No, they don't. They're all different. When you wake up, if awakening happens to you, enlightenment happens to you or in you, beingness, truth, will use your personality, your quirks, to navigate the world. And so you look at the different teachers that you know who are awake, and they're all very, very different. Osho was very different to Eckhart Tolle, very different to Ramana Maharshi, very different to Nisargadatta. They're all so different. Very different to Papaji, Robert Adams, Ramesh Balsika. Just to name a few of my heroes. All very different.
Would a lot of material possessions be a sign that someone isn't enlightened?
You mean like 93 Rolls Royces? I think that's how many Osho had when he was at the ranch in America. Someone who's awake can have anything they like. They just won't be attached to it, that's all. You can have whatever you like. It's the attachment that causes the problem. It's the attachment that creates resistance because of the fear of losing what you've got. You can have whatever you like, just the attachment can't be there. That's all. Osho had 93 Rolls Royces in America in the 80s. I doubt very much whether he was attached to any of it. Matter of fact, he couldn't have been. The idea that you have to be poor to wake up is a fallacy. It's simply not true. It might be easier to wake up if you're poor because you're not attached to so many things. But my experience with attachments, when awakening started to occur, everything just dropped away. Everything just dropped away.
I've read that the Buddha, Gautama the Buddha's disciples used to sit in no mind to listen to his teachings. Why do you think that would be?
Oh, I wasn't there, so I don't recall that. No mind. I used to find no mind in meditation, but it's not enlightenment. Some people think it is, but it's not. It's just no mind. It's just awareness, aware that the mind is not making any noise. It's not a bad ground for awakening, though, because the mind's relaxed at that stage. And it is a relaxed mind that supports high consciousness, supports love, supports enlightenment. The question or the statement, the Buddha's disciples sat in no mind. I wonder who measured their minds at the time. I wonder if they had cephalographs on them all to see if their minds were making any noise. It's silly. Just tune in. If they were sitting with the Buddha, they would have been tuned into his energy. And then what can occur is what's called the transmission of the lamp. The Buddha is the lamp. He's a light. He's a fire. And those that sit close can tune in. And there can be a transmission of this lamp from one to the other. It is not lost from the first to give it to the second. And this is the beauty of satsang, of sitting with someone who's awake, because that is the potential of satsang, enlightenment. If the student is ready, enlightenment can occur. The transmission of the lamp can occur. The Buddha is always transmitting, never ever not transmitting. That is the Buddha field itself. For those that are ready, it is enough. That's all. Thank you for satsang. Good to see you brave hearts here today.